what did you learn from so many interviews, and what could our audience learn from that? Like, are there low-hanging fruits that aspiring engineers, data professionals could focus on when they're heading into an interview?
Yeah, I think that's maybe two separate questions. Like, one is like how to evaluate candidates from like an interviewer point of view, and the other one is like how do you impress the interview. I think if there's anything I've learned from interviewing thousands of people is that interviewing is like just incredibly hard, and like it's like having hired a lot of people that I've interviewed and then like thinking back, like who did I think would be good versus who was actually good?
Yes.
I've actually realized it's a very hard prediction problem. And that I think is like at the core of like what interviewing is about. Like you're getting a chance to meet someone for like, 4 hours or whatever, and you're trying to assess, you're trying to make a prediction. Is this person going to perform in my organization, right? That's what it comes down to. That turns out like is a very hard sort of, low signal to noise, problem. Like you meet someone for 4 hours and you have to make a, very hard decision. So if there's anything I learned, it's like there is no trick really. Like you just have to like collect a lot of signals and try to, combine them in some way. And it's like funny because like some people are like, well, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. Like people have very strong feelings about how interviews should be conducted. You shouldn't do whiteboard interviews. You shouldn't do whatever. Like you shouldn't do take home, or you should do take home. Like, I don't know. To me, it like boils down to like, I don't care. If someone told me that like, whether someone can like, spot a card trick, or like if someone could like, so, like it doesn't matter. Like if someone told me there is like some like absurd thing that has like super high correlation with their future ability to do well in my organization, I think that's a good signal. And like that's what it comes down to. Now, like talking about signals, I think you can sort of reverse engineer a little bit and like think about like what are the things that generates the most signal per time, because I think that's like sort of, I think, good sort of heuristic for like how to design interview processes. I tend to think that, for instance, like whiteboard questions are bad because at the end of the day, at the end of that, you spend an hour like doing a whiteboard question, you get sort of like one bit of information. Like, did they like solve this thing or not? Maybe not. You get a little bit more, but like it's sort of like not like time efficient, like versus like how much information you get. I tend to, for instance, favor code reading instead. And the reason is that, if I, write down 20 code samples or 10 code samples or whatever and go through, with the candidate, like, can you spot the bug? Like, what, how does this work? Can you explain, how to optimize this code or things like that? You can actually cover a lot of terrain very quickly. And that is like, I think, at least how I think about, ways you can get more signal per time out of interviews. So, but then it obviously boils down to like, it also comes down to what role you're hiring for and things like that.
That is interesting. For data science interviews on my team, we do use a whiteboard a lot, but it is solving a lot of different problems. So we have the candidate work through a lot of different phases of like data science model development. Yeah. So like, I'll present a problem and say, what kinds of data are out there? How would you start on this problem? Yeah. And then you can keep going down the line of, okay, then, how would you create a model with this? What kind of model would you have? And then so I find with at least for data science interviews, with a whiteboard over an hour, I can cover like kind of from conception through to getting into production, a data science model, and dig deep on parts that like I find interesting as an interviewer. I might even learn some stuff.
I think that's very smart for two reasons. One is that you're covering a lot of different things. So it's a way to sort of decorrelate your signals. Like going back to how to think about signals, you want to find a lot of signals that are like kind of independent. And then you combine them, then you reduce the variance, right? Whereas if you go all in on like one, like, skill, then you may get more variance.
Fizz buzz.
Exactly. Like the other reason why I think it's good is that I tend to think what you're doing, what you're describing, it sounds like you're doing more like filtering for more like a goal-oriented type person. And I think that's actually something I've realized is that, it depends on the role for sure. Like there are different, types of role that need different types of things. But like, depending on the role, you might need like either like someone who's like more tool-oriented, who like, they're like very good at like their craft. They know like Kubernetes or Docker, like whatever, super well. But for a lot of roles, you actually don't want that. Like you want someone who like fundamentally comes in every day and there's like kind of does like whatever has to get done in order for the business to get its results.
Right.
And I think, kind of talking more from like a business context, I think is very important, specifically for data scientists, Not always, because there are some data scientists who are all about just like, squeezing a couple more, percentage points out of accuracy, like, if you're running some whatever speech recognition model for Alexa, like those people might be like super valuable.
Yeah.
But for like 99% of data sentists, I think,
Exactly.
you want to focus on people who are like more like business focused and care about the end result. And I call it almost like data journalism. Like it's like almost like a pursuit of the truth. Like they think of their job as like, they want to uncover the truth, like buried in the data, right? That's what fundamentally like gets them going, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting. You've talked a number of times in this interview, what you look for in interviews explanation about signal versus noise. And I think there's one other thing that makes interviewing so hard. So a couple of episodes ago, episode 616, I did an episode on the 4 requirements for expertise beyond just the 10,000 hours thing that like Malcolm Gladwell talked about, people like to talk about. And so one of the things that you have to have is you have to have what they call a valid environment, which is this idea of there being meaningful signal relative to noise. So the smaller the signal is relative to noise, the harder it is for there to be anything to learn about, to become expert in.
Yep.
But then the other thing that makes hiring so hard to become expert at is the temporal lag between making the decision and finding out whether it worked out or not. So the kinds of things that you can become expert at tend to be things that you can learn immediately. Oh, I made the wrong chess move. You can see right away.
Yeah.
Oh, I answered this math problem wrong. You find out right away. Whereas with hiring, the argument that I made in that episode was actually literally with hiring. I said, you can't really become expert at hiring because the time lag is so long. It's months, years before you know. And so even somebody like you who has made thousands of hiring decisions, because of that time lag, it becomes hard to be like a true expert. Like you could be like Magnus Carlsen, like with chess. Like it's tough to develop that same kind of expertise.
Totally, and I think those are 2 very different types of skills, right? Like on that spectrum between like fast feedback loops and like very slow feedback loops. VC, like investing in a company, like how do you like it takes 10 years to know.
Exactly.
So I think part of it is like you just have to develop like a strong intuition for like kind of proxy metrics. Like if you're like a VC or if you hire a person, you may, it might take a year in order to like fully understand their productivity, or in the case of a VC, it might take 10 years to see them go in public.
Yeah.
But, you might be able to see like early signs, earlier on. And that like then can let you have like a tighter feedback loop. But I think this is like, a general problem also going from like, being an individual contributor to manager is like something I've thought a lot about. And I personally struggle a lot with, is actually like, not that the skills themselves are necessarily different. I think the biggest thing was just like shifting from like a short feedback loop to like a long feedback loop cycle. Like you're so programmed, like growing up, I grew up programming, you're so like trained to have this like sense of like immediate gratification. Mm-hmm. You come home every day and you're like, I wrote like so much code, like I feel good, like I saw this code and it's amazing, right? And then you start managing, you just come home every day and you're like, I don't know, I just don't feel like I did anything.
Right.
But like, like a few years in, you start to realize like, actually, I hired this person or, I managed this person in my team, I had a tough conversation. And then now like 6 months later, I'm noticing she's changed her behavior. Like you start to recognize those things and those things become rewarding, right?
Right.
So, and I think, doing that, it's like the marshmallow test. You kind of have to like learn how to like, fail, like to win at the marshmallow test.
This is a complete aside, but just this week, I read that the marshmallow test, if you control for socioeconomic factors,
I've heard it too. I feel like all these like psychological things, like they almost like turn into like, what's the word? Like allegories. Like they're almost like, they're almost like tales more than they are actually true. I mean, it's the same thing with like Dunning-Kruger. Like people talk about Dunning-Kruger effect. Turns out the original study was actually had like many flaws and wasn't really true. There's all these other things too, right? But like, I don't know. Like
Remind me of that one. What's Dunning-Kruger?
Dunning-Kruger is this idea that like, there's like an inverse correlation between knowing how much you know about something and realizing how bad, like this like, people think of it as like a U-curve. Like when you don't know anything, you think you're really good at it.
Right.
It's actually not what it is. There's, it just, but like roughly speaking, the way people interpret it is like, when you don't know anything, you think you're good. And then as you learn things, you realize that you don't know about it. And then you like finally become an expert. Then you realize you actually know a lot of things about it again.
Right.
Again, that's not what it is, but that's what people think it is.
Gotcha.
And I think as such, maybe like it's fine to refer to as, I don't know.
Yeah.